The bullet that should have taken his life only pinned him to the frozen ground. Blood soaked into the snow while shellfire thundered in the distance. He lay helpless, staring up into the silvery winter sky, knowing that the man approaching him through the smoke had been trained to kill him without hesitation. On this battlefield of shattered homes and falling snow, mercy did not exist, or so he believed. But this was the day everything would change. The wind howled through broken trees surrounding a ruined village. Sergeant Ethan Cole pressed himself against the remains of a stone wall, his rifle steady, breath fogging the cold air behind his mask. Through his scope he saw shadows moving between collapsed buildings, enemy troops slipping into position. The radio crackled with orders as explosions rumbled beneath the muffling blanket of snow. Ethan fired when movement crossed his sights, watched an enemy soldier fall soundlessly into the white. Return fire ripped the stone near his head, forcing him to duck. Then, above the chaos, he heard a scream, raw and choking with pain. Not the sound of battle, but the sound of a man dying slowly. Ethan followed the cry and spotted the young soldier lying between twisted beams. Blood poured from a shattered thigh as the man tried to drag himself through the snow. His rifle lay just out of reach. Panic flooded his eyes as he looked up. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, not the faceless enemy Ethan pictured during training. Just a frightened boy bleeding out alone. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and something deep inside Ethan broke. There was no hatred staring back, only terror. The radio barked again, "Coldcon, firm kill." Ethan didn't answer. Doctrine demanded he finish what he started to protect himself and his team. The wounded soldier raised his trembling hand, not to surrender, but to shield himself from the shot he believed was coming. That instinct mirrored something painfully familiar. Ethan saw his younger brother's face in that moment, same age, same fear. He stood instead of firing. Ignoring bullets cracking through the air, Ethan ran forward. Snow spray burst around him as rounds struck the ground. He reached the wounded man and dropped to his knees, lowering his rifle toward the earth. "No," he whispered. The soldier froze and let his hand fall away from the abandoned weapon. Ethan ripped open his medical bandage and pressed it hard against the bleeding wound. The soldier screamed, but remained conscious as Ethan worked, refusing to leave him despite the deadly exposure. In the chaos of battle, time narrowed to the two of them alone. A laminated card slipped from the soldier's jacket pocket, an image of a smiling mother and two young girls. Written on the bottom was a name, Yuri Volkov. The wounded man saw the card and whispered, "Yuri." Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan." Their eyes met not as enemies, but as men, real people trapped in a war neither had chosen. The sound of running boots echoed nearby as reinforcements began to close in. Ethan slid Yuri's rifle further from reach and gestured urgently toward a dark cellar opening hidden beneath collapsed bricks. "Hide," he whispered. With immense effort, Yuri dragged himself into the shadows. Ethan quickly covered the opening, then sprinted back into position just as friendly troops surged past, never noticing the life spared only moments earlier. The battle pushed forward, erasing any trace of compassion beneath destruction. The war eventually ended. Ethan returned home with medals he couldn't bring himself to wear. He married, became a father, and rebuilt a civilian life. But the face of the wounded soldier never left his mind. He wondered endlessly whether Yuri had lived or died, unable to find his name in any records or reports. Only the frozen battlefield remained in memory, unanswered and unresolved. 7 years later, an envelope arrived with careful handwriting, Sergeant Ethan Cole. Inside was a photograph of a smiling man beside a fishing boat. The same eyes, older now, unmistakably alive. On the back were words that made Ethan's breath catch. "You gave me back my life, Yuri." The letter explained everything. Found hours after the battle, Yuri had survived against all odds. He now had a family who knew the story of the stranger who chose mercy. Ethan sat in silence as tears finally fell for a war he had never truly escaped. Months later, the two men met in a quiet riverside cafe. When Yuri stood and extended his hand, hesitation vanished. They embraced as brothers bound by an impossible connection. Over coffee and trembling voices, they spoke of families, nightmares, and the shared moment between bullets. Then Yuri admitted the truth. He had been carrying a hidden pistol that day and could have shot Ethan when he approached, but didn't. He said he saw compassion in Ethan's eyes first and chose to trust it. Both men realized simultaneously that they had saved each other. Years later, Ethan stood in a classroom sharing the story with children. When one boy asked how he could spare someone trained to kill him, Ethan answered softly, "Because hate never ends wars. Only voices brave enough to choose something bigger." On a battlefield where thousands chose to fire and kill, one soldier chose to kneel, and by saving his enemy, he saved both their souls.